Cuttlefish are capable of diverse camouflage to match color and texture, but do they have background preferences if given a choice? Early visual experiences can influence cuttlefish behaviors like learning, memory, and prey preference. In this experiment, S. varonis cuttlefish eggs were separated into 4 groups and raised on different backgrounds. There were 4 sets of background choice experiments, which lasted 50 minutes each, with a picture being taken every 30 seconds. The snapshot was then scored based on if the cuttlefish was swimming, if it was stationary with fin movements, or if it was stationary with no fin movements. Experiment 1 consisted of all 4 groups tested on background preference on day 1 post-hatch. They were tested for preference on contrast level, shape of substrate, size of substrate, and a side preference. Experiment 2 consisted of the enriched group, the low contrast group, and the high contrast group being tested on the same backgrounds in experiment 1 at 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and 12 weeks post-hatch. Each background was tested on a separate day. Experiment 3 consisted of different individuals than in experiment 1 or 2, from group 4 being exposed to a checkerboard pattern for 30 minutes or 3 hours a week, and tested on the same backgrounds used in the previous experiments on the same time intervals.
Significance was determined at p-values at a 95% confidence interval. E group showed significance for high contrast at all time points. E group also showed preference for small size on day 1 and week 12. L group had preference for low contrast on week 8. H group had preference for high contrast on week 12. S group had preference for check shape on day 1. There was no preference for side at any time period or group. There was an increase in preference for high contrast background over time when tested again in week 8. In nature, heterogeneous substrates offer an easier background for camouflage. This supports the consistent preference to high contrast backgrounds for the groups raised in the enriched environment. There was little preference for shape as cuttlefish visualized light intensities rather than physical shapes. There was a trend between size of cuttlefish and size preference during development. At week 4, cuttlefish switched from preferring small checks to larger checks closer to their own body size. The lack of side preference in all trials determined that cuttlefish did not prefer one pattern to another based on location, and that selection was taking place. Experience-dependent preference is important as it provides a defensive advantage. The cuttlefish raised in unnatural environments demonstrated reversed or delayed contrast preferences. Overall, the environment that cuttlefish are reared in influences their preferences for defensive mechanisms later in life, with a strong advantage being seen in those that develop in enriched environments.